So before Mandy reads, I want to share with you a couple of statistics that I looked up. Um, Obviously, suicide is still very rampant uh, in the world, in the U.S., and whether we want to believe it or not, it's active within the church too. Even if people aren't, committing suicide, the thoughts of suicide and the thoughts of harming ourselves is there. And I don't know if you guys have ever faced this or not, but there is a certain point in your life, certain points in your life, and I'll kind of get interactive right here, and I want you guys to jump in there and chat with us. There are some times in your life that are literal crises. It's not just a midlife crisis, but there are things. And I don't know, some examples that I can think of is a crisis would be divorce. It's a crisis. It's a crisis for the couple. It's a crisis for the children. It's a crisis for the families. It's a crisis for the church. And even things that you might deem a crisis, someone else might not, because we're all different. And things that you might handle in a different way, other people's may not handle that. And that's one thing we really got to understand is that we're all different and we're going to handle things different. What's some things, Mandy, that you would think would bring about a crisis?
I would think child diagnosis.
Yeah. A cancer diagnosis,
a
poor
cancer
health.
diagnosis. I mean, it's so diverse. It could be loss of a job. It could be loss
Yes.
of a home. It could be income. And coming from like a pastoral view, I'm not a pastor, but coming from that view, it could be someone leaving a church or
a church split.
A church split. Crisis is anything that can just make you. It just hurts to breathe.
Absolutely.
That's just
Brother Mark said the death of a mate, or a spouse.
Oh yeah.
It's something that, and Mom said divorce, and that is something that leaves the person in the crisis feeling so misplaced and so confused and so scattered. It's fight or flight. In my case, in my crisis, I chose flight. I got out of there as quick as I could. I just ran. But there are things too, like even graduation, going from middle school to high school. That's a crisis for someone that age. Going from high school to college.
That's right.
Is a crisis. Going from college to the workplace is a full-blown crisis. It's like, oh my gosh, now I have a big girl job, and what am I going to do? Jerry said the death of my daughter, Brooklyn, absolutely.
Yeah.
It's a crisis, and what happens, guys, when we're in the middle of a crisis? And some people call it people have midlife crises. Let me tell you, it's a real thing.
Yeah.
Mental health during all these times is so important, and it's a real thing. So what happens in all those crises is that we're thrown into a feeling. How would you describe it? We got fight or flight. What's another way to describe it?
We got,
because you are
out of control.
Out of control.
I'm a control person. Very, very much control. And Heather, what you're saying, man, prayers to you. Prayers to you and
Absolutely.
Your family. But it's fight or flight. It's out of control. And then once you try to control other things because that makes you feel in control.
Right.
It could be starvation. I mean, if we're going to go deep, let's go deep. Starvation. It could be turning to other vices, drugs, alcohol. It can even be scrolling.
It can.
Doom scrolling.
Because we check out. We check out.
Going into that other realm, that may be make-believe world, because it's just so easy. I'll just scroll. What is it?
Exactly.
What is it? Doom scrolling, I think is what it's called.
Yeah. Yeah, to where we feel like we want to check out of that situation and check into another. Yeah. And because that one is too much to deal with, or this, anything like that. Robin said family division, divorce of your family, abuse. My goodness, all of these things will spin off a crisis, a crisis all around. And typically in the middle of a crisis, I'll give you an example with me. You have empty nest syndrome,
Yeah.
to where you are literally titled as a mother, as a wife, all these things, and then all of a sudden that's gone. And you don't know where you fit anymore. It's like I don't know what to do without, apart from, changing diapers and running to sports and doing what you're doing right now every day. And then all of a sudden I'm not a wife. I'm not I'm not a full-time mother, and all of these things are just, crisis mode, and then trying to figure out in the middle of all these things going on in your life, where do I fit now? Who am I now? Okay, and Mandy, I hope you don't mind, but most people know you. Mandy is a child of divorced parents.
Yeah.
It leaves something in a person, in a child of divorced parents, that
It leaves
is.
a mark.
It just leaves the mark. So then you have a child in the middle of a crisis. Where do I belong? Do I belong with daddy? Do I belong with mommy? Where do I belong?
Oh,
And that's,
yeah,
numbness,
absolutely.
depression, just the rug pulled out from under you. Eula, you're right on it. I mean, I have been there with you. I understand. So what that does is it spins you off into crisis mode. So we're going to talk about that. And then you get left in the feeling of, where do I belong? What's my role? I don't fit anywhere now. Everything is upside down. I don't know how to feel about this. I'm numb. I don't feel. I'm in between. I'm not who I was, but I'm not here either. I don't know who I am. I don't know what to do.
It's kind of like you go from where do I belong to do I even?
Do I belong?
Do I?
Am I
Like,
worth being here? Does anybody care?
am I, is this worth it?
Hi, Michael.
I mean,
Good to see you, buddy. Yeah. Yeah,
you'll
and
learn something with Yule and I were very ripped the band-aid off in a lot.
well, yeah, I mean, because these are issues that's happening within the church too, and the church is the place we want to point you to, not pull you from. We want you to go to your pastor. We want you to go to your church. We want you to be faithful to church, and that's where we want to push this to, is that, hey, you belong. Whatever lie you're listening to or however you're feeling, we hear it. We can connect on that, and I know exactly how you're feeling because I was there. And I felt like I didn't belong anywhere. Every church I went to, I didn't feel like I fit. I didn't fit here. I didn't fit there. All those things. So, all right, start reading. We've already rambled more than I wanted to, but here we go. Here we go, everybody. Acts chapter 8. It does. Acts chapter 8, verse 26.
All right. Yes, we're going to start with verse 26. So excited. And the angel of the Lord spake unto Philip, saying, Arise and go toward the south, unto the way that goeth down from Jerusalem unto Gaza, which is a desert. Now remember, Jerusalem to Gaza. And he arose and went, and behold, a man of Ethiopia, a eunuch of great authority under Candace, queen of the Ethiopians, who had the charge of all her treasure, and had come to Jerusalem to worship. While returning and sitting in his chariot, read Isaiah the prophet. Then the Spirit said unto Philip, Go near and join thyself to this chariot. And Philip ran thither to him, and heard him read the prophet Isaiah, and said, Understand thou what thou readest? And he said, Oh man, I can't wait. How
Go
can
ahead.
I, except some man should guide me? And he desired Philip that he would come up and sit with him. The place of the scripture which he read, was this: He was led as a sheep to the slaughter, and like a lamb dumb before his shearer. So opened he not his mouth. In his humiliation his judgment was taken away. And who shall declare his generation? For his life is taken up on the earth. And the eunuch answered Philip and said, I pray thee, of whom speaks the prophet of this? Of himself, or of some other man? Oh, yes. Then Philip opened his mouth and began at the same scripture and preached unto him Jesus.
What did he preach?
Jesus. You may keep on going.
No, stop right there. Stop right there just a second, because we're going to do what we always do, and we're going to deep dive into this. Now, how many times have we read this? Many times. Many times we've read about, Philip and the Ethiopian eunuch. And most of the time we're focused on the fact that he went and he climbed in the chariot, he preached Jesus, and then went on his way rejoicing. Okay, but if you dive into this, y'all, like we're getting ready to, there's so much meat and so much bread in this. Okay, so I'm going to talk a little bit, and I'm going to hand it over to you, Mandy. But for me, this is like one of the most heartbreaking but affirming stories that we read about in the New Testament. Okay, it's heartbreaking, but it's affirming. So we have this this man. We're not even going to refer to his condition. Okay, we have this man, and he has began a journey. So what we read about is that he had went down to Jerusalem to worship. First of all, I'm going to have to address this man's condition so that we could set the scene of this whole story.
Here's the backstory.
But he is an Ethiopian eunuch. And if you don't know what a eunuch is, we're getting ready to tell you what a eunuch is. And I'm saying is because some of these practices that I was studying, there still are eunuchs in other parts of the world. So this wasn't just an Old Testament time. This is in some cultures, still a thing. I know that's hard to believe, but it is. And in some cultures, it is still a thing. So the fact that he's Ethiopian was not Ethiopia like me and you think of Ethiopia being today. This was actually not Ethiopia that we know today at all, but it was modern-day Sudan is where this man was from. So he had decided to take upon himself a journey to go to Jerusalem to worship. However, he was an Ethiopian eunuch. So in being a eunuch, he had became a eunuch, and by the word eunuch, what I'm saying is that this man was altered. This man was changed. His whole condition, his whole physical appearance was changed. A eunuch in these times had their job was to serve. They were the guard of the bedchamber mostly, or the guard of the finances of the royalty, of the king or the queen, but mostly they were put in charge of like the harem and the women. So their sexual member was removed so that they wouldn't be a threat to the people that they were guarding. They couldn't have a family. They couldn't reproduce. They had no threat to the king that they would take their women and have any desire for any of the women in the courts. So they thought that by altering them that they would be more trustworthy. So their whole condition was completely altered and completely changed. And there was 3 ways that this could come about. And we find, if you need to look it up, Jesus speaks of those 3 ways in Matthew. If you need to look it up, send me a message and I'll give you the chapter and the verse. But there was 3 ways that they became a eunuch, and that they became a guard of the king's bedchambers, of the harem, of the concubines. I mean, all those things that the king thought the only way he could trust him was to alter him and change his desires, so that he didn't desire any of the women. So they could become a eunuch in one of 3 ways, either by birth, meaning they were born with a deformity in their private parts, or it was forced upon them, or they chose it. Either way, they were completely altered, and they could not function as reproductive men. And that's who this eunuch was. And he had decided that he was going to Jerusalem for worship. Now, here's what me and Mandy were talking about today. As I got to studying that, he apparently, it wasn't just going to the Sabbath, y'all. He wasn't just going for a church service on Sunday. But the journey from where he was in modern-day Sudan At that time, it was called Cush. That journey was 1,500 miles. 1,500 miles, which by chariot would have been 3 months there and 3 months back. So this wasn't a Sunday, Saturday, Sabbath worship. This had to be during the time of a festival or some kind of religious gathering that was pre-planned and a pre-studied trip. Okay? So something else that bears mentioning, and I'm going to let Mandy tell it, is what was the rules, the Old Testament rules for a eunuch? Did we lose you? That's fine. Okay. Mandy's using her sign language, her signing skills. Okay, so in the Old Testament in Deuteronomy, we know that a eunuch was strictly forbidden to enter into the assembly. Strictly forbidden. They could go and be on the outside of the assembly. They could go to Jerusalem, but they couldn't go into the assembly because in Deuteronomy and in Leviticus, there were strict rules that any kind of deformity, blemish, alterations, anything could not enter into that part of the assembly, and they couldn't join in. So this left them where we were talking about earlier, from the outside looking in and feeling like, well, I really, really want to partake in this, but I don't belong. And I've been told that I don't belong. I know the law, and I just don't belong there. So, yet, even still, it's exactly like being behind the veil. It's like I want to go in and I want to know God, but I can't. I have to let somebody else do it for me. So, go ahead, Mandy. You got anything?
No, I'll just let you keep on going. You're on a roll, girl. You just tell me.
Okay. So we know that he was a eunuch. We don't know how he became a eunuch. That's not important to the story. His identity and who he had, the identity that either had been pushed upon him and forced upon him, or the identity that he was born with, or the identity that he chose is not relevant right now. But what is relevant is the reality. There is a difference in identity and reality. And this man was a eunuch by some sort of degree, some sort of way he became a eunuch. So with that being said, and I'm going to throw this very quickly because it's very important. So according to most Bible commentators and according to Solomon in the scriptures, most believe in Bible history and Christian commentators and Jewish history believe that Solomon, we know that he was very fond of the Queen of Sheba, very fond. And we know that she was very fond of him, and he even told her that she could ask anything that she wanted of him, and he would give that to her. Most commentators believe that she asked for a child. They all believe that. They believe that the Song of Solomon was actually written about her, and that he actually sent her back with a child because she wanted a child and she wanted an heir. So he sends her back, and commentators and Bible history, Jewish history, point to the fact that those descendants of the Queen of Sheba are exactly what the Ethiopian Jewish believing people were, because they were considered blessed because they were partly Jewish because of Solomon. Okay, so this eunuch is sitting, desiring to go to worship with a full identity crisis. Basically, he's like, I'm part Jewish. They had every right to believe in the God of Solomon, and they took on those practices. So he was part Jewish, and he was also born a eunuch and could not enter in to all of the rights of the Jewish people with their God, with Yahweh. Okay, so am I losing you, Mandy, or am I good?
You're good.
Okay. All right, so here he goes, and he's going to make this 3-month journey through Cush, going all the way to Jerusalem to worship. We know that he had to be well off because he was a treasurer of the queen, and he was traveling in a chariot. Those aren't, it was probably more like if you could picture a covered wagon, is is probably more so of what the chariot was, because it wasn't a chariot like a war chariot. He wasn't going into war. He was going to worship. So I got to wondering and studying how in the world a man from 1,500 miles away, for one, why was he going to Jerusalem, and what was the purpose and what was going on during that time. But I found out that also this was a trade route up that road. And so there was sea trade throughout that whole journey, and he was the treasurer. So I feel like there was probably part work and part worship too. Yes, Karen, along the journey. But remember, it was 1,500 miles. 3 months it was going to take him to get there, just to not enter in.
Yeah. And whenever when we were looking, sorry, just butted in here for a second. Whenever we were talking about the 1,500-mile thing, because I'm a very literal person, like, okay, where would it be at right now?
Yes.
In modern time. So me and my little BFF chat GPT gets together, and I put, where would you end up if you were 1,500 miles west of Beckley? Because if you go east, you're going to be an ocean. And it said that it was equivalent. Here, let me pull this up right here. It was equivalent to eastern Colorado, like Denver. That's how far.
My goodness.
Miles was, where you meet, depending on which direction you go to, you'd be in New Mexico, or it might lead you to, somewhere close to there. It just depends on your direction.
Right.
But 1,500 miles is.
Yeah. That's a good journey. In a chariot.
In a chariot. No paved roads, no air conditioning, no Starbucks on the side of the road. Chick-fil-A,
right.
Nothing.
So this man has gone up to worship, and remember the rules were that he could worship because, and actually, there were scriptures that blessed them, the eunuchs, who, and we're going to get to that in just a second, the eunuchs who kept the Sabbath and who did those things. There was blessings for those promised in Scripture, but he was going up to worship for a festival, for something. Something was so important that he wanted to be in Jerusalem at that time so that he could worship. And here's the thing, though, is he didn't belong. He did not belong, but he still wanted so bad to go. But society, depending on what part you were from, they viewed the eunuchs differently. Some of them had on royal, attire because they were working, right beside. They were the eyes and the ears and the mouth of the king and queen. So they were of high regard. But some of them were not, and mostly because they were different and because they were altered. They were changed. There was no mistaking a man who had been changed in this way. He had very little testosterone, so he was going to look different, and he was going to act different. And a lot of that not even on his own choosing, but sometimes maybe it was because that's how he wanted to serve in the king's court. But so he gets there to worship, and he can't enter in. He can't go into the assembly, but he's still there, and he's still trying, but he can't fit in. And he is wondering about himself, where do I fit? I feel like the God of the Jewish people is my God. I feel like that's my God. Yahweh is my God. But I could never, ever partake in the rituals. I can never partake in anything. And whatever he is going to Jerusalem for ends. And he starts his journey 1,500 miles back. Okay? So from my study, what I found today was that approximately 50 miles south is Gaza. Jerusalem sits on a hill and actually on a mountain. So when the angel comes to Philip and says, hey, Philip, go down out of Jerusalem, he literally meant go down, go south out of Jerusalem. And Read that again, Mandy. What did he say? That scripture. He said, go down from Jerusalem.
He says, and the angel of the Lord spake unto Philip, saying, arise and go toward the south unto the way that goeth down from Jerusalem unto Gaza, which is the desert. So much I could say there.
Right. Go ahead.
Go to the desert. This story is very, it's one that is so deep, and the series that we're doing this one, you have to get the backstory in order to know where we're going. Like, stay with us. There's a point to it.
Absolutely.
Whenever he tells Philip, Philip the evangelist, God has guiding Philip. I'm glad
you brought that up.
Yeah, to a specific location for a special mission. I mean, even though the road is in a very remote desert place, Philip obeys without any question.
Yes, that's what I was wanting to get to, because we just came out of Hosea, and the commandment to Hosea was simply go and love her. We just came out of that. What was the command to Philip?
Just go.
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 Just go. Mm-hmm. Philip had no idea who was going to be on that road. Philip had no idea who was inside the chariot. Philip had no idea what he was even going for. The angel came and said, go down out of Jerusalem into Gaza. Mind you, I just told you it was 50 miles roughly. So this eunuch, Mandy, made it 50 miles from Jerusalem. And I'm going to imagine, for the sake of this story, that 50 miles was excruciating. Sister Karen said it a while ago. It had to be so disheartening. He had just traveled 1,500 miles, but I know that Sister Karen and Mandy, I know that he knew he couldn't enter in. But something, we don't know what it was. He knew that he couldn't join. He couldn't even join the assembly. He couldn't even worship with the people because it was forbidden according to the law that he could ever do that, because he was altered. He was damaged. He was no family. He was looked down upon because he couldn't produce a child. All these things. He was an outcast. He was an outcast.
He was altered. He probably, that was all that he had ever known, was to have
damaged.
That label of damaged.
Damaged.
Label of, I see these people doing this, but that will never happen for me.
Well, I feel like in this story, and you guys can chime in with what you think, I think his crisis started when he left Jerusalem. I think it was an immediate, I don't fit. I want to fit, but I don't fit. I don't belong, and I feel so displaced, and I'm damaged, and I don't understand any of this. Now, this is after the resurrection, right? So while he's in Jerusalem, he had to hear about Jesus. Something had his head reeling. He may have even overheard somebody in the crowd saying, hey, Jesus, came, he died, he resurrected, and he was probably like, well, I want to know more about this, but I don't, how do I even learn it? Nobody will teach me.
Yeah.
Nobody will show me because they won't deal with me. I'm a eunuch.
Right.
I'm damaged.
And you just kind of, you kind of wonder, like, if he was reading from, the book of Isaiah, and he was saying, hey, he was led as a lamb to a slaughter.
Mm-hmm.
Like, who is this guy? Like, wait.
Yeah. Is he talking about himself, or is he talking about somebody else?
Like, who?
Yeah.
Who could be led as a slaughter? Is he dumb? Like, maybe he had been told, you're a miscreant. You are not worthy. So is this, is this
right? Don't even read that, because you're not allowed to be a part of that group anyway.
Right. So,
why are you even interested? Why do you even believe in God? You can't really worship him. All of those thoughts was probably put in his head by other people, and probably in his heart, because, yes, Karen, that was his reality. Yeah. He probably went in with a hopeful heart just to be there in Jerusalem during worship, but then he left with reality of, I don't fit anywhere. Okay, so this man is 50 miles from Jerusalem, and obviously over 1,400 miles, 1,400, 900 miles, almost 1,500 miles
Yeah.
from home.
Yeah.
So he is sitting right in the middle of nowhere, sitting right in the middle of his crisis.
Reading
But
something that he doesn't, he's reading it out loud.
understand.
Like
He's reading it out loud. Exactly. So what's it mean when you hear somebody reading out loud? That's to help you understand. Plus, from what I was searching today, is it obviously wasn't in his language, his native language. But remember, he is not just damaged, he's mixed. He's pulled in every direction, and he is in complete crisis mode coming home. It's like, I want to read this. So we know the man was wealthy. He also had his own scrolls. Yeah. And scrolls weren't printed then. They were handwritten. And he had his own scroll of Isaiah.
He had access to it, where a lot of them,
mm-hmm.
even if they weren't a eunuch, they may not have had access to it. It was just
right.
word of mouth. But he was
right.
physically holding something, and he, like, there's just so much that I wish I could just have.
Mm-hmm.
There's just so much to unpack from this.
There is.
He's representing someone who is seeking God, but may not fully understand yet. But yet he has a high status, but he's humble enough to seek the truth about God.
That's right.
I mean, he had a very high status with Queen Candace.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
But he was like, wait, the math ain't mathing here.
Right.
What's going on? And
yeah. Why do I have such a draw to worship when I can't do it? Everybody's told me I can't do it. Mm-hmm. Everybody's told me I don't fit there.
Like you can't go here. We don't want your kind.
You go back and serve the king. You can't serve this king. Yeah, you can't serve our king. You go back to Ethiopia and serve your king. But yet he was so unsettled and so curious. He had his own scroll. Obviously, he was going to Jerusalem to worship specifically. So he was serving his partially Jewish roots. He still had that in him. So he gets down into Gaza, gets into the desert, and starts into full-blown a crisis of understanding. I don't understand this. I don't understand this. I don't understand why I want to worship. I can't worship. I don't understand this. I'm damaged. I don't understand it. But make no mistake, he's in between. He's sitting in between where he was, where he's going, where he's been, where he wants to be. I mean, who he is and who he wants to be. I mean, he is in full-blown, torn apart, sitting in the middle of the desert, understanding crisis mode. But remember, on the other side of this, the angel has already came to Philip. That's how much he loved the eunuch. The angel already came to Philip and said he didn't tell Philip what was going on, but the angel knew, God already knew that there was someone in their in-between spot that needs a word.
And
there's somebody.
Philip ran.
He said, go to the desert, go down out of Jerusalem, and go to Gaza, go to the desert.
That chariot.
He didn't get that word yet.
Yeah. And I mean, he didn't even know what was in it.
He didn't know.
No.
He didn't know who was in it, nothing. So Philip runs. Philip gets down there. Mind you, it's 50 miles, and Philip had just been preaching in Samaria. So it's roughly around 50 miles for him to get there to that chariot. So you're talking days here, guys, that God was doing his thing, and the eunuch was doing his thing, and Philip was doing his thing. It is important to our God. It is very important to our God that people understand that it matters to God if you're feeling like you don't belong. Yeah. He does not want his children, and we are all his children, he does not want his children to be in that valley of Gaza, in that desert, in the chariot, feeling like they don't fit anywhere. Okay, so he sends Philip specifically to address the situation of you belong,
Yeah.
Brother Eunuch. We don't know his name. We're calling Brother Eunuch. So he sends Philip. Philip doesn't know that he's on a mission to tell this man that he belongs, that there's been a way made, that he can enter in and that he can belong, that he doesn't have to feel like an outcast anymore, that he doesn't have to think about his damage anymore, that he doesn't have to think about whoever damaged him or whether he chose to damage himself. That is not important anymore because a way has been made that you belong now.
Yeah.
And Philip goes to run. However he gets there, I guess he runs 50 miles.
Yeah. And he like, and he hears him read, you know.
And he's hearing that eunuch sitting in his chariot reading out loud. And I mean, I don't know about you, but if I hear Noah struggling to read, or I hear somebody struggling to read, I know they're struggling to understand.
Yeah.
I think Philip could hear.
There's a disconnect there that,
Yep.
and more importantly, that it needs to be addressed. And like,
Absolutely.
if it's not fixed, it won't.
Yeah.
It won't correct itself.
Right.
You know.
So when Philip gets down there close enough to hear this eunuch, Brother Eunuch, believing,
great.
He gets he gets close enough to hear it. Then I think that at that point, Philip's like, I see why I'm here.
I'm getting you now.
But mind you, Philip had no idea this man was a eunuch. He hadn't seen him. Remember what I said, that there was no mistaking really a eunuch. When you saw one, they lacked testosterone and they would look a little more feminine, or they would look, different because they just were altered and damaged. They were different. So he gets up to the chariot. He didn't see him and say, nope.
Sorry, wrong one.
You're just going to have to sit there and feel like you don't belong because he didn't.
He probably didn't think, man, I do not think I heard him right. Probably not this chariot. Maybe 50 more miles down the road.
Yeah.
But it says that in verse 30, that after Philip had ran to him, that he hears him reading, and he asks the eunuch, do you understand what you're reading? And my opinion is Philip is very gentle.
Absolutely.
With how he asks that,
Mm-hmm.
and it also says that sometimes, well, not sometimes, a lot of times, people really need guidance to fully understand a spiritual truth. And so that's why, we said in the beginning, if you ever have, like doctrine questions, anything, this is just us talking about the Bible.
Yeah. Go to your pastor. Go to your leadership.
Yeah. But the eunuch answers, excuse me, how can I? Except that some man to guide me.
And nobody will guide me because I'm damaged.
And he desired Philip that he should just come and sit with him. When Ella was little and she was learning how to read, there would be times that she would be in her room, sitting at her little Minnie Mouse table, reading a book. She's probably 4, reading a book, and she'd be sounding out a word, or she couldn't understand it. And all that I had to do was go in there and just sit by her, sit at a table, and just explain it. And then she would read again, or she'd read another book, and that word would come back, and she would never have an issue out of it. But whenever the eunuch asked, how should I know this? Except someone guide me. I mean, how should I?
Right.
But
Sister Karen said because that might damage their reputation.
Exactly.
What if Philip had said, if somebody sees me teaching a eunuch, because Philip knew the law too. I mean, this wasn't the disciple Philip. This was the evangelist Philip.
Yep.
But he knew the law too.
Yeah, and he's only mentioned, really, his beginning story is really in Acts. Like, I think it's Acts chapter 6. But it really just reflects humility. And I mean, how many times have I we were just talking about it now, like fake it till you make
Yeah.
it.
Yeah.
I mean,
And
that I might not have understood something.
I pray, y'all, and there's people watching right now, and y'all chime in, but I pray that God would give me that heart and that zeal,
Yeah.
that when I see
Service.
somebody sitting in a desert, sitting in their chariot alone, he probably had a driver, but the chariot was only big enough for two people probably, and he's sitting there struggling, trying to understand where he is, where he fits. How can this be? I'm in full-blown crisis. I'm sitting alone. God, give me a heart of Philip the evangelist that I will run to them and not away from them.
Yeah. A
That
servant's
that
heart. That's
that
really
when the
what
Lord
it's going to
speaks and
take.
says go to this person, they're struggling. Well, actually, Philip didn't know that he was going to a person at all. He just
Just
told
go.
go, and he went. Uh, but when he got there, he hears the man struggling, and he sees the struggle, and he says, "Hey, man, you know what you're reading?" Because Philip knew when he heard the scripture where that conversation was going to
Oh,
lead him
yeah.
to.
Yeah.
And then I would imagine, I don't know, when Philip seen that he was a eunuch, maybe he had some kind of robes on that he knew it and he could see the chariot, that it didn't change Philip's message. Philip's
No.
message was still Jesus.
That's what that gets me every time. Is that's all that. Honestly, for the ones that are listening on here that are the Philips in the
Hmm.
world right now.
Yeah.
It just says in verse 35, then Philip opened his mouth and began at that same scripture and preached unto him Jesus.
Yeah.
That's all we have to
Yeah,
do.
because the Ethiopians, the eunuch said, "Climb up here in my chariot and explain it to me."
Yeah.
Philip climbs in.
No
How does
hesitation.
that look? He
Yeah.
wasn't standing
No
on the
hesitation.
outside. He's just climbing up in there. He's like, "Yeah, man." He said, "I'm going to explain Isaiah to you." Can you flip over there and get ready to read that for me, Mandy?
Which one?
53, where he was reading, where the eunuch was
Isaiah
reading.
53. Yeah, I got you.
Yep. And he says, yeah. He said, "I'll explain what you're reading in Isaiah 53. And then, y'all, this is where it gets good. This is getting ready to kick up right here, and we're getting ready to talk about real belonging and exactly what the plan of Jesus was. Eula Harrison said, when a new person comes to church, make them feel welcomed. Jump in their chariot, y'all. Jump in their chariot.
And
If they don't feel welcomed, chances are they won't be back.
yeah. And I'm a firm believer that no one prays at the altar alone.
Yeah, never.
No one
Never.
prays at the altar alone. You
Yep.
go up there. You go up there.
Yep. Yep. You're
So
not. Go ahead.
sorry, what would you say?
No, no, no. No. Go ahead. I'm gonna save it.
Isaiah 53. I want to start at verse 7.
All right. This is where the eunuch was reading, y'all.
Yeah. He was oppressed and he was afflicted. Yet he opened not his mouth. He is as brought as a lamb to the slaughter, and as a sheep before her shearers is dumb. So he openeth not his mouth. I'm trying to see what red out there. I got 4 different screens up here. But that was the main gist of it. Was he
Yeah.
read 53 verses 7 and 8. I'm going to
Right.
read 8 real quick.
Go
And he
ahead.
was taken from prison and from judgment. And who shall declare his generation? For he was cut off out of the land of the living. For the transgression of my people was he stricken.
So Philip starts reading this back to him, and it almost sounds like he is describing the eunuch. He was cut off from his people. He had no family. He was completely just damaged, you know. And Philip starts to present that to this eunuch in a way that the eunuch could relate to it.
Yeah.
And then I would imagine, you guys, flip over to Isaiah 54, the next chapter. I don't think that Philip stopped at Isaiah 53. He said, this right here is about the Messiah. Isaiah 53 is about the Messiah. This is not about Isaiah. This is the prophecy of Jesus, who you probably just heard about in Jerusalem. But let's go ahead just for the sake of it and read Isaiah 54. And Isaiah 54 starts with single barren. Remember, the eunuch could not have children. The eunuch was completely cut off from reproduction. He could not. Isaiah 54, I would venture to say, Philip also opened up to him Isaiah 54 and said, single barren, because you're about to bring forth more children than the married wife. Yes, single barren. And the eunuch is sitting in the chariot going, there's a promise about for the barren people? Then Philip probably said, wait, let's read a little bit more.
Wait, there's more.
Let's go to Isaiah 56. Turn over there, Mandy.
Did you say 55 or 56? 56?
56.
Yeah.
And I would imagine this is where Philip landed, right here. Isaiah 56, and start reading at verse 4.
For thus saith the Lord unto the eunuchs that keep my Sabbath, and choose the things that please me, and take
Blessed be who?
Of my commandments.
What did that say? To the eunuchs who keep my Sabbaths, who choose the things that please me and hold fast my covenant, I will give my house and within my walls a monument and a name. What? Philip just told the eunuch that he would have a name. He would have an identity, a new identity. Listen to that. Better than sons and daughters. So he comes out of 53 hearing about Jesus, and then he goes into the promise that's coming to the barren women. Then he goes into the promise that's coming to the barren man. Not just the barren women, but the barren men. And he's saying a promise bigger than sons and daughters. A promise that's bigger. Are you shushing me?
Mm-mm.
A promise that's bigger than sons and daughters. There's about to be more coming out of you, brother eunuch, than you could even imagine. And the eunuch felt like he was sitting in a dry, barren place. But in Matthew, Jesus, I think it was in Matthew. No, I think it's there. Oh, it's right here. In 56, back up at verse 2. Blessed is the man who does this, and the Son of Man who holds it fast, who keeps the Sabbath, not profaning it, and keeps his hand from doing any evil. Let not the foreigner who has joined himself to the Lord say, the Lord will surely separate me from his people. And let not the eunuch say, behold, I'm a dry tree. He said, don't say that you're dried up and you'll never produce anything, because what I'm about to bring out of these broken people who feel like they don't belong anywhere, these people who are discarded, Mandy, as trash, are still useful to me. The world has told you that you are useless and you don't fit anymore. You're in the middle of a empty nester crisis, that you feel like you're useless. You don't have children to bathe and children to feed, and maybe you're in the middle of a divorce and you're like, I don't know where I fit anymore. I'm useless. I'm not a wife. I'm not a mother. I'm just going to go find my own way because I don't fit here anymore. And that's exactly what happened with me. You know, I'm just going to make my own way because my way was broken up. So I don't belong anymore. I'm just going to make my own way. And that's what I did. And the eunuch is sitting there in a desert, in a chariot, struggling to understand the word. Philip opens up the entire word to him and just starts preaching Jesus. Jesus is your hope. Jesus is your solution. Jesus is where you belong. And he's made a way that you can now enter in to the assembly, and you can now you can put up your praises without any judgment and any hindrance. You do belong. So Philip is sitting in this chariot, and the chariot at some point starts to move. I loved that. He is sitting in the chariot, and at some point progress starts to happen. At some point. I don't know what point in the conversation, but that chariot is commanded to move. And so we know that the chariot belonged to the eunuch, right? Who's in command of the chariot? Philip or the eunuch?
Right. Right. And I think that that's really, there's just so much to
Yeah.
take out of this. I wish that I wish we had like super long time to just
Yeah.
go through everything, the confirmations that we've been getting this week.
Yeah.
Oh,
Yeah.
and like this is me. I think that you get a guy who, like Hosea, had a command. Hosea knew a
Mhm.
little bit more about his command, but Philip goes and he's just walking down the road. And then he says, and then he hears God say, "Hey, go join yourself."
Yeah.
And
Hey,
then
go get in that chariot. Go get in that man's
there.
chariot.
Yeah, yeah. Go join. Not
Hmm.
go walk.
Right.
Join yourself
Yeah.
to this
Yeah.
chariot. And then you have a man, and at the time that term was held very loosely with someone, with the eunuch. So you have this man sitting in a chariot who is trying to find his place. He's not,
Yeah.
and he feels unworthy. He
Hmm.
hears all these, he's heard all these things, in the temple. Man, how heartbreaking it would be for me.
I can never do that.
I couldn't, but how heartbreaking, like, I couldn't imagine going to a church, and I'm not talking any specific church, but going and not being able to participate,
Hmm.
not being able to worship. And I'm not saying that the church would tell me I couldn't, but in myself feeling like I wasn't
Yeah.
worthy,
Let's ask some of these guys, what are some things that puts us there in the chariot feeling worthless, feeling like we're not qualified, feeling like we're damaged? What are some things that could keep us from entering in? What is your damaged part? Think about that. What is stopping you from progress? What is just keeping you at the curiosity level? What is keeping you sitting in the chariot instead of commanding your chariot to go forward? Because it was the eunuch's chariot. Philip could tell him how to do it, could tell him about Jesus, but ultimately it was the eunuch's chariot to command. So the eunuch had to make a choice to move forward, to move where he belonged.
Couldn't hold it up.
Yeah. So what's some things that you guys would think? I'll kind of start it off. Um, Condemnation keeps us from entering in, you know. I feel like maybe in my case, being bitter and having things in my heart that kept me from entering on into where I belonged, feeling in a place of I don't belong. I was in the in-between. I can't feel God. I can't move this way. I can't move that way. I'm just sitting in Gaza in my chariot trying to understand the word, and I'm getting nothing. Teresa Kazor said unworthiness. Absolutely. I'm just not worthy to enter in. That's the way the eunuch felt. Robin said no, and I still held hate in my heart. So you're saying, Sister Robin, that you felt like you couldn't do it because was full of so much hate. I get it.
That one, is it Marcella? Is that how you say that?
Yeah.
Marcella? I
Yep.
love that name.
Hmm. Yeah.
People's perceptions.
Yep. Maybe she's been in and out of church so much she gonna stay this time. You're dead on it, because that's one thing that kept me in Gaza. It kept me sitting right there feeling like I couldn't go either way, because nobody's going to believe me. Even though I tried not to abuse, the reason I stayed out so long was because I tried not to go in and out, in and out. But it didn't matter, because there was a place for me. I just had to command my chariot to go to it. Okay? I had to be in control of that. I could have people come to me all the time, but it wasn't going to do anything until I commanded my chariot. Heather said sometimes ashamed.
Oh, yeah.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
I'm too ashamed, you know. Sheila said, not trusting a leader over me. I've been so wounded by them. I get that too. Marcella said, it keeps me here because I think, well, what's people going to say? I got an answer for you. Don't get off of here because I've been there. Eula said, if you had backslid and felt unworthy and others talking about you, yeah, absolutely. And that's something too. It's like I really want to be part of the church, but there's a
Yes.
there's a
Yes.
lot of backsliders or backbiters or gossiping that goes on in the church. Well, my goodness, if so-and-so can make it, then I can make it. How many times have we heard that? And it does keep people out. It's like, well, it's a bunch of hypocrites in the church, and they're just sitting there in Gaza, not entering into where they belong, to where they can be accepted because they're just sitting there in that place, just full of all this, feeling displaced and confused in your head. That's your Gaza place. Where you're sitting at in your chariot is exactly where Satan will jump in your head and catch you at that vulnerable moment to where he keeps you sitting there in the chariot and it can't move forward.
Jeremiah.
It can't move. Go ahead, read them, Mandy.
Allowing words of negative people. Well, Karen and Esther said unforgiveness. Yeah, absolutely. Like, oh, yeah.
Yeah.
And then
Yep.
Jerry Myers said, allowing words of negative people, saying, you're not worthy, or this, or you're not aggressive enough for that position.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah, you're damaged. Don't even try that.
Yeah, you're a misfit.
Yeah, you're an outcast.
Yeah, you're an outcast.
You know.
You're not going to. And we could sit all night and just find reason, and they're all so valid. They're like, well, I mean, one of the reasons why what I can say is, well, you know,
That's right.
she's been in church all her life.
Yeah.
Like,
Yeah.
why? Well, she's been here all her life. We don't have to worry about her. She'll never
Yeah.
walk away. She's been
Right.
here all her life.
They said that about me too, though, Mandy.
Yeah. And
nobody could believe that I walked away from God.
Yeah.
Nobody.
And they would still continue to, to say whatever. Honestly, they would say whatever they wanted to say because they would think that, well, you've been in church all your life. You just know that this is how it is.
Mm-hmm.
But there are places that's not like that. Gaza does not have to exist anymore. God broke that.
That's right. That's right. That's right. Okay, so Heather Webb was talking about when she was unmarried and pregnant, like a lot of people talking about her, felt like she couldn't join back into the church or go to the church because so many people was talking about her. I know, I get it. Sister Sue Adams said, God said to leave them alone, let the tares grow with the wheat, and he will separate.
Yes.
That's exactly right. Marcella was talking about, worrying about what people's going to think, that nobody will believe her, and nobody's going to believe that she gave her heart. Don't go anywhere because I'm getting there. So he commands the chariot to move, and they start moving, and Philip is still talking the plan of salvation to the eunuch, and he's still telling him what Jesus came to do and the promise. And at some point during that conversation, the eunuch asked, well, what do I do so that I can belong into this great thing and I can lose this sense of being an outcast in this? You mean to tell me I can do this? Philip says, yes, I'm telling you that you can. And the eunuch says, but what will people say? But what will people say? And that's, the common question. What will people say? What will my friends say? What will my husband say? What will my parents say? What will my kids say? But the main focus in that chariot, y'all, was Jesus. And something had to be blocked out of that eunuch's mind so that Jesus could speak to his heart and that Jesus could pull him into where he belonged. But it took a commanding of the chariot to move forward, because what happened when that chariot started moving? All of a sudden, and I have researched this all day, Mandy. When that chariot started moving, where are they, Mandy? In Gaza, in a desert place. All of a sudden, there is a body of water available in the desert. Okay? So when I got to studying the map of that, where is this? I got to know where this body of water is in the desert. You know, so I was looking at the map and studying the terrain, and it was mountainous, it was dry, it was barren, just like him. Okay? So the whole area he was in was just like him. You know, and that tends to happen when you feel like you don't belong. You will gravitate toward a place that makes you feel comfortable.
Yeah.
Okay. I mean, you've got to recognize that, y'all. That feeling of not belonging, that feeling of I don't know who I am, and I don't know where I fit in the church, and there's too many cliques in the church, and there's too much this and that. If you're not careful, you will gravitate toward where you feel like you do belong. And if you lean on that understanding, you will surround yourself with the same environment that's inside of you. And I say that with the most humble spirit because I was there. I felt like I didn't belong here anymore. And it wasn't because of other people, it was because of me. But I felt like I didn't belong here, so any place that made me feel like I belonged, then that's where I gravitated toward. So you're talking to a girl here that never, ever would have ever stepped anywhere that a bar. I mean, we didn't go to movies when I was growing up.
Oh, I know.
You know?
Yeah.
So I find myself standing in a bar, and I am completely just like a culture shock, you know. But guess what? I loved it because I'm a social person, and everybody came up, and everybody hugs, and everybody talks, and everybody's happy. I walk back in the church, and they don't know how to approach me because of what I've been through. They don't know what to say. And I felt I had so many walls built up. I made myself not belong, you know, and it was like, oh, well, I felt better here, and these people were happy, and these people, so I belonged here. And there was a constant pull in me in Gaza of, do I move this way, or do I go back this way, or am I just sitting here, or am I going to command my chariot to move forward? So I got to study about that terrain, though, Mandy, and it is a lot of people don't know where this water was. I looked all day, but the Mediterranean Sea was about 5 miles from where they were sitting in Gaza. As far as, no, I'm saying that wrong, and I'm afraid if I go on, I'm probably going to say it wrong. But I studied it, and they couldn't figure out where this possible body of water was.
Yeah.
But either way, he commanded his chariot to move forward, and that was the first step of moving toward where you belong. So we know that conversation was, you know, Jesus is the way. Jesus is that sense of belonging that you're looking for. All of that is in Jesus. You will find that in Jesus, not people, and not what you've been labeled as, and not your damage, and not your altered state. But Jesus is the completion of you. He's the completion of you. And everything that you're looking for, you will find in Jesus, because he already said that you belong. In Isaiah 56, he gave you a promise. Now all you got to do is command your chariot to move toward it.
Yeah.
So they get to this body of water that if somebody finds out where that was, please let us know. This body of water that Philip baptized the eunuch. Well, the eunuch looks over and says, what's stopping me from getting baptized? Here's a body of water. And then he commanded his chariot to stop. He commanded the chariot to stop. And he got out with Philip, and both of them went into the water. Philip baptized him. And in immersion, baptized him in that body of water, came up, the Spirit carried Philip away. The eunuch never seen him again, but what did the eunuch do? He went on his way rejoicing. The man that was in the desert X amount of miles back, who was sitting in his chariot struggling with where he belonged, now the story ends with he's rejoicing. What does rejoicing look like to you? You know, it's happy. He belongs. He fits. Read those comments, Mandy. What we got?
My comments are kind of delayed, so if I don't see them quite yet, I will. Yeah. Whoa. Okay. And you have Amanda Taylor. Love your name, Amanda. That says we need to stop worrying so much about what others say or think, and worry more about our relationship with God and His opinion with us.
It's the truth, but it's hard.
Oh,
I know that it's the truth. We do need to stop worrying about other people, but we're human. And y'all, the feeling of acceptance is such a strong thing. So what I was saying was about suicide at the beginning of this. The top reason, the top number one reason, I'm not talking about methods, age, anything. Reason is not feeling accepted, feeling like they don't belong.
Yeah.
That is heartbreaking.
Oh yeah, and another thing is, we talk about not feeling worthy, and we talk about finding your place in the world, and we talk about salvation and how salvation is surrendering, and it's hard to surrender whenever you've built up all these walls.
Absolutely.
But everyone's church hurt is real. People hurt is very real.
It's very real.
And I don't want no one to think that that every church is a place that you're just going to get bogged down, because you're not.
That's right.
You're not. But one thing, because we both grew up in a minister's family. We heard a lot of comments. We probably had a lot of comments about us at one point or another.
Absolutely. Oh, they still talking about me.
Oh yeah, probably me too. But the one thing that I had to learn how to do, and it was so hard, was to surrender my feelings about
absolutely
those comments. God create in me a clean heart, and I'm not talking about purging me from the sin. God, create me a clean heart to where I don't have that root of bitterness building in. God, create me a clean heart to where when I don't feel like I'm worthy or I don't feel like I belong, God, create me a heart that says, hey, you are worthy. You do belong.
I had to get to a part to where I realized that I couldn't go on the way I was feeling, y'all, because the way I was feeling would have kept me out. My chariot would still be in Gaza.
Yeah.
I would still, no matter who climbed in it and told me about Jesus, had I not commanded my chariot to move, then I would still be sitting there, Mandy, because the way I felt versus what I knew was a crisis. I'm serious. I'm sitting in my chariot, in a crisis. I know better, but I feel this way. So then there you are in a full identity crisis. I didn't know who I was anymore, and what I said earlier, if you are struggling to feel like where you belong, I'm not getting closer to God, I'm just sitting right in the middle of Gaza in the in-between. Don't you know that the enemy loves to see your in-between? He loves to see you sitting in Gaza. But remember who commanded. Philip didn't show up by accident, y'all. Philip was sent by a loving father who saw the eunuch in his chariot in Gaza, in the desert, in the middle of nowhere, 1,500 miles from home, and said, I got you.
It's that same God that had, years back maybe. I don't know the time frame, so I can't say how long it was from crucifixion to this time.
Right.
But just to think that the same God that orchestrated that whole plan sat on a cross, laid on a cross, and said, it is finished. That time of your unworthiness and that time of you not belonging, I've nailed it to a cross.
I'll tell you something that I've been doing, Mandy, since you brought that up, and this might help you guys too, but something I've been doing since I gave my heart back to the Lord. Y'all, I told you I struggled with trust. I struggled with a lot of things, so I'm relearning how to do these things. Something I've been doing, I've been saying it is finished a lot, but I've been adding on to the end of it whatever I'm struggling with.
Oh, yeah.
Getting personal about it.
Absolutely.
I've just been saying, okay, unbelief, it is finished. No more of it.
Cross. It is buried.
And that's,
that was resurrection.
yes, that's what I'm saying about commanding your chariot.
Yeah.
You have to be in control of your own chariot. It wasn't, Philip could talk Jesus all day. Mom and Dad could talk Jesus to me all day long, every time we're together. Candace and Dalton could talk Jesus to me. But I had to command my own chariot. I can't expect God to come down. You know, Philip comes up in there and preaches this great word to the eunuch. But the eunuch could have said, all right, thank you, buddy, get out. But the eunuch said, this is up to me. What do I do? What do I do? Tell me how to belong. Tell me how to feel better. Tell me how to get rid of these thoughts in my head. Tell me how to move closer to the water. Tell me how to move closer to the water because I want it.
Right.
You know, and it is finished. So I've been saying that, Mandy. I'm like, you know what? Doubt. It's finished. I don't have to worry about it.
Yeah.
Get behind me.
It's behind
I'm
me.
commanding forward. I'm moving toward the water. I'm commanding my chariot. What we got, Mandy? God saw one of his children hurting, and he's, is he? Baby brother Dalton. God saw one of his children hurting, and he sent someone to tell him that about Jesus who loves him. Yes, Sister Jerry, yes. Come on, we're not fighting for victory. We're fighting from it. Yes. So this eunuch is sitting there, and obviously they make it to the body of water. You see me rocking? I'm feeling it.
I know what that rocking is. I've been with you before.
I'm feeling it. But it's just such a passion in me to let people know that they belong, you know, and I'm going to get to that in 1 second because we're going to wrap this up because we got so much, and this is probably going to be 3 or 4 on belonging because we're going to talk about our role in people who don't feel like they don't belong. We are Philip. We are the Philips, and there are people who are yet to command their chariot, and it's up to us to get in that. So I get excited because I want people to understand. I felt like I didn't belong anywhere for 13 years, and I was so sad. You know, I was happy in my life, and because I had gravitated what made me, yes, God was giving me bread, but I had gravitated toward, you know, what I felt I needed to make me feel belonged and to make me feel loved and to make me feel those ways. But, y'all, as human beings, children of our divine creator and now covered and hidden, you know, by the sacrifice of Jesus, there is a constant yearning, especially in a backslider, a yearning just to come back. You just don't know how, or you just don't, you think you don't want to, or you think now I don't belong because everybody knows what I've done. When I stood there that day, I had to make a choice and command my chariot. The word was coming for me. They were opening up Jesus to me. I was standing there, but I could have easily stood there, and I tried to stand there and just not command my chariot to move forward at all. And I hope y'all know what I'm saying about commanding your chariot. It's about being in control of your choices, and it's about hearing that word from the Lord that moves you forward. You know, if you're sitting there and you're wondering, how can I feel God? I don't feel like I'm getting this, and I feel like I'm stuck, and I don't know who I am anymore, and I feel so displaced. My family's split up. My parents are divorced. I'm fighting with my children. I have buried my child. My child just got diagnosed with a horrible disease. I'm burying my father, my mother, and I feel like now I don't know. I feel like an orphan. I mean, there are so many things that people are dealing with. My church split, and I don't know where to go now. My friends in my church went this way, but this is my home church, and I need to stay. It's a crisis. It's Gaza. You're just sitting there, you know, trying to understand. But I want you to know that we have a Father who sees your chariot. He sees you sitting there struggling and hurting and feeling like you don't belong because ultimately, y'all, there is not another thing in this world that's going to give us the satisfaction and the belonging as the being in the arms of our Father. And that's the truth. And what you have to do, y'all, and I'm not one to say what you got to do is this and you should be praying. We've talked about that. I don't respond to that well. I just don't. But you know, I know that there are times that accountability and correction has to come my way, and I have to be ready to receive it. But I'm telling you, from somebody who just crawled their way back to Jesus out of situations that people thought I would never get out of, the only way that I could do it, y'all, was to focus completely on Jesus. I knew I was so desperate at that moment that it didn't matter to me. It didn't matter to me. I just had to focus completely on Jesus. And I had to take that step and command my chariot to go where I know that there was comfort and belonging and life that was already given to me through Jesus.
Go
command
forward.
your chariot.
Go forward.
Yep. Be in command of your own chariot.
And I tell my team this all the time for work, especially, whenever we face, like a restructuring or just something different, is we can't change where we've been, but we can change where we're going.
Oh, yeah. That's our song. We're still going to write it.
Yeah. We can't change where we've been. We can't change where we've been, but we can change where we're going.
Yeah.
And if you don't get nothing else from this, you're like, well, y'all just don't know where I'm at right now.
We don't
know where I have been right now. No, I don't.
We don't.
But God does. And
God sees your Gaza.
God sees your Gaza. He handcrafted you. He knows your frame. And the only thing that you have to do, again, this isn't us pointing your finger and saying you have to do this, but the only thing you need to do is just surrender it. That's all.
It's the difference. Surrender.
No,
just surrender.
Rest in knowing. And whenever Ella was little, and I know I keep going back to Ella, but that's our world right now. But
well, sure it is.
Whenever she would, fall asleep in the car when she was a baby, she could fall asleep and not have to worry about being left in a car. She knew that I would pick her up, take her inside the house.
She knew you were coming.
She knew it. Like she could be so secure. She could rest. She knew that I would be there to pick her up and just take care of all of her needs. Easier said than done, but it's going to be one step in front of another. Just keep walking.
That's right.
Just keep going.
That's right.
Every day, new mercies. You might have a bad moment today. Tomorrow's a new day. Just keep going. Just keep going. You belong. Just keep going.
Yep. So as we get ready to wrap this up, and it's such a good study, I hope you guys have enjoyed that, and I hope that you understand it's not so much, it's the sense of belonging. And I know that there wasn't a whole lot of deep answers in this, but this is, like I said, a series, and we're building off of this story to move forward into that belonging. But I want to ask you a question. I want you guys to really, really think on this. What's in your chariot? What's in your chariot? Unbelief, doubt, sin. What's in your chariot? And I'm going to sit right here and we can think of so many things that I just, sometimes I think, Lord, what's in my chariot that's keeping me from where I belong? What's in my chariot that's keeping me from commanding to move forward? What's in your chariot? What's keeping you from your place? Because ultimately this eunuch is credited with starting a grand revival when he got back. And if you go and study it, he turned out, according to the church and church records, that he started a great revival as a missionary and was even accredited to start the Ethiopian church.
You can't argue with someone that hasn't experienced it.
No. So ask yourself that this week. What's in my chariot? What is keeping me from commanding myself forward? Because Philip couldn't do it for him. Philip could tell him about Jesus. I have people approach me all the time since I got back in church. It's like, I want what you got. I want what you got. I'm like, I can't. You got to command your own chariot. I can climb up in there and tell you about Jesus. I can cry, and I can beg and plead and help you to understand that you belong here. And I can be that friend to you. I can take you out for coffee. I can buy you lunch. I can pray with you. We can go to church together. We can have Bible study together. But you are in control of your own chariot. You know, not me, not Philip. Philip couldn't command that chariot. It wasn't his. You know, I can't tell you what to do, and you can't command me. But you have got to get, control. The first step is saying what's keeping me back? And the eunuch said, well, here's water. What's holding me back? Well, if you believe in Jesus, nothing's holding you back. Get out of the chariot and go to the water and let's do this. And then he went and made disciples. So